Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Transition to Organic webinar series for crop producers. We are super excited that you all are here with us today. Today's topic is going to be a wonderful panel on farmer perspectives on transitioning to organic. This webinar series will be held for 10 consecutive weeks on Wednesdays from 12 o'clock to 2 p.m. Pacific time, starting today, January 14th to Wednesday, March 18th. This webinar series is a collaboration between three organizations: Community Alliance with Family Farmers, UC Cooperative Extension, and the UC Agriculture Institute. My name is Grace Jackson, and I am the Farmer Services Regional Lead in the Central Valley with CAFF. Margaret Lloyd is another collaborator from UC Cooperative Extension who will be joining us in future weeks. And Katharina Ullman is from the UC Organic Agriculture Institute. And I'll pass it over to Katharina to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Grace. As Grace said, my name is Katharina Ullman. I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator with the UC Organic Agriculture Institute. And I'd like to say a big thank you from all of us to all of the farmers on the call for both producing the food that we eat and for taking the time to be here today. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And I'll pass it back to you, Grace.
Thank you, Katharina. We'd like to thank our funders for making this webinar series possible. Thank you to the CDFA Office of Agricultural Resilience and Sustainability, CDFA's State Organic Program, and the USDA Transition to Organic Partnership Program. This webinar will be available to watch on the UCOAI and CAFF YouTube channels after the webinar series. So if you do miss any of the weeks, you will be able to catch up with them at a later date, and you will receive an email with presentation slides and resources every week after the webinar to catch up on those as well. I wanted to give an overview of the webinar series and give you all an idea of what to expect. So our weekly structure, we have about 2 hours to spend together every Wednesday. We'll do a brief welcome every week, and the majority of the first hour will be spent either in a presentation or a panel like today. We're leaving 15 to 20 minutes at the end for Q&A with our presenters and speakers, and we will be collecting those questions throughout that come in through the chat. We will wrap things up shortly before 1:15 with a closing poll, and then the last 45 minutes from 1:15 to 2, we will host optional office hours where we will do continued Q&A with our weekly speakers, and we will also have a breakout room where you can get help with your organic system plan or certification. The webinar series comes with a resource guide, which I will send in an email after today's webinar. In this resource guide, you can access weekly Zoom links, presentations, resources that are shared, and we also have OSP homework in each week that you can follow along with to try to make progress on your certification goals. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Katharina.
Thanks, Grace. So as you all know, we are in week 1 of a 10-week webinar series. Today, we'll be hearing from a farmer panel about their experiences transitioning to organic. Over the course of the next 10 weeks, you'll hear from farmers and other experts on a variety of topics. Ultimately, we hope that this series provides resources, community, and support to help you make a successful transition to being certified organic. To provide some context, I want to note that there are over 3,000 certified organic farms in California. A farm can be certified for crops, livestock, wild crops, and/or handling and processing. This particular webinar series is focused specifically on organic crop production. Organic farms can look really different, but they all follow the same National Organic Program rules. And we'll talk more about the regulations next week during during the 10 Steps to Organic Certification webinar. So now on to the main event, the farmer panel. We are very grateful to have with us today a great moderator and two fantastic panelists who will share their experiences with organic farming. Molly Nakahara is our moderator and the education manager at the CCOF Foundation, where she supports technical assistance and mentorship for farmers transitioning to organic. She farmed organically for 15 years at Dinner Bell Farm in Grass Valley, California. Welcome, Molly. Thanks for being here. Héktor Calderón-Victoria was born in Mexico City. Héktor has farmed for more than 10 years in both Northern and Southern California and now co-operates a farm called Three Feathers Farm in Santa Clara County. Thank you for joining us today, Héktor. We're glad to see you as well. And finally, Bruce Rominger. Bruce is a fifth generation California farmer who runs a split operation growing both organic and non-organic crops in Yolo County with his brother Rick. Their farm is called Rominger Brothers Farms. And thank you for being here, Bruce. And with that, I'll pass it over to Molly.
Thanks, Katharina and Grace, and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see in the poll that we have so many farmer producers with us today. I know that the sun is shining, at least here in California, and I want to acknowledge you taking the time to be inside, or maybe some of you are outside, but certainly not looking at your crops, looking at your screens, and potentially starting your journey to learn more about organic and make an organic transition. And so I just want to welcome you to this space and congratulate you on your journey. As Katharina and Grace shared, I work with the CCOF Foundation, but I also have a background in organic farming. And so I'm going to be asking questions of these wonderful farmers that have joined us today. And I may also chime in with some of my own experiences as well. And we'll have a lot of time for question and answer toward the end of the panel. So thanks so much for joining us and looking forward to this rich conversation. We're going to get started by just learning a little bit about who we have with us today. So I'm going to ask each of our farmer panelists to please introduce yourself and introduce your farm and give us some brief background on your farm. So where you are, what scale you produce at, what your main products are, what your sort of primary sales outlets are. Give us a landscape of your farm. And then in addition to that, if you could also share, why did your farm choose to certify organic? So how that fits into the intro of your farm. And we're going to start with Bruce. So Bruce, over to you.
Thank you, Molly. I'll start with my introduction. I farm with my brother, like she said, over here in Western Yolo County. Been here a long time. We have a large scale farm. We're not doing any direct marketing. So we have approximately, I think, 700 acres certified organic and probably over 4,000 other conventionally grown crops. But we are in rice and in row crops, primarily processing tomatoes and other rotation crops that go with that. And then we have a small amount of orchards too, almonds and walnuts. So been doing this, a long time. I started with CCOF in the early 90s when I first started certifying ground to grow processing organic tomatoes, but got out of that organic tomato business for a while. Several reasons. The market wasn't too good. We had restructuring of our farm. So one of my cousins actually started farming the organic stuff. We later got back into it, growing organic rice, but now we're back into the organic row crop business also. So I've been with CCOF a long time ago. Recently, we were certified with the Yolo County Ag Department, but they are not going to continue their certification services. So we are moving back, starting that process with CCOF. It's been a roller coaster, you might say, with being in and out of organics for this many years. So I have a perspective on it. Primarily, like most farmers, we're looking to grow something that will make us money, and we like the idea of being able, if it works on our operation, to get an organic premium for crops that we can grow organics successfully. Um, but organic row crop rotations have the same challenge that conventional crops have right now, where it's hard to find things to rotate with maybe your cash crops. We do okay on organic tomatoes, but we can't grow that every year. So we're looking always for new organic opportunities to grow other crops. We're not in the direct marketing business. I don't want to start, going to farmers markets and things like that. We're, wholesale producers, probably going to stick in that range, although we're open to different opportunities as they arise.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing the background on Rominger Brothers Farm. I want to mention that both of our farm panelists today can be found online. And so as you're listening along, you can also be sort of digging into more information about both of our farmers online. So Héctor, over to you to also share more about your farm and why you chose to get into organic production.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, for sharing a little bit about your farm, and thank you, Molly, for having me as a part of this panel. For many that don't know me, I'm Héctor Calderón-Victoria. I am the co-owner of a 5-acre farm in Morgan Hill, which is located in the south part of Santa Clara County in the Bay Area. And Three Feathers is stewarded by both myself and my co-owner, who's Dilip Sharma, who happened not to be here today, but he is also part of the farm. And Three Feathers Farms is really dedicated to really nourish the communities in Northern California through the cultivation of organic foods rooted in ancestral wisdom that really honors the earth and preserves cultural heritage and strengthens community through their well-being. And in knowing that when people are, cooking with our food and using their produce from Three Feathers Farm, we're also preserving the diverse heirloom crops from from generations that to come, and to also bridge those stories from our past and provide nourishment to our communities. In saying that, a lot of the crops that we do grow happen to be things that we really enjoy growing, as well as things that sometimes we just have to grow because our community also enjoys them. And those can be from a, long list of different varieties of, peppers, tomatoes, corn, garlic, onions, and, other culinary herbs that we also grow, along with, cut fresh flowers. And so those are sort of the things that we do. And really, the outlets that we've sort of navigated primarily have been mostly for wholesale, working with food banks, nonprofits, working with aggregators that are sort of like coordinating some of these programs that are out there, and as well as school districts, which is our newest one that we've sort of taken on just last year, and hoping to continue to doing that moving into the future. But we're also working with just community and working with, providing direct to consumers. And we also love that. And we're hoping to move in forward of like maybe joining one or two, farmers markets in the future, hopefully this year, and doing a little bit more of direct consumer as things are sort of shifting on the wholesale for us as well. However, I think what really sort of enticed us to do organic certification has been really the trust that community members have when they hear that we're growing organic, right? So I think when we can build that trust with our consumer or our buyers, I think that is the most important component that we can sort of really give and guarantee to a lot of the folks that are buying our produce. And so I think that's where we are really leveraging ourselves through using, this certification through CCOF and organic.
Thanks, Héctor. I'm appreciating that in hearing from both Bruce and Héctor, we're hearing so many different motivations for why a farmer could choose to certify organic. It can be a market business decision. It can be a customer relationship. It can be a personal values decision, and maybe a combination of all of those things together. So appreciate that you highlighted so many different ones. And I noticed also, I was poking on Bruce's website, and I saw that you also have a sort of direct relationship to people coming to the farm. I don't know if that's still happening. You have, it looks like a trail system that's sort of open to people, which is really a very cool thing. And so that kind of points to like, there's all of these unexpected things that can happen along in our farming journeys. And I would love to hear from both of you, what what has been a big success that has come from organic, and the choice to go organic? And oftentimes, those successes come as a direct result from potentially a challenge that you've been experiencing. And so, if you could share both, Bruce, we're going to start with you. Could you share sort of a major success that your farm has experienced with organic? And also describe a challenge that you experienced with organic and how you overcame that challenge.
Well, we have a upcoming challenge, which I'm not sure we're going to overcome, but the major success, I guess the most recent one is just the fact that we were given the opportunity because of other retirement of someone else with organic ground to get back in the organic row crop business. And that was something I've wanted to do for quite a while, but the crop that drives that in our area for us would have been the processing tomatoes, and really the market had become saturated with a lot of growers with organic ground trying to fill that niche, and there really were no contracts to get. And so it just so happened one of our processors was moving some of their organic production from the San Joaquin Valley up here to the Sacramento Valley, and it fell into place for us, and it was really a wonderful opportunity to get back into the organic tomato production on a fairly large scale. That was really helpful for our operation. And we like the idea a lot of having organic as part of our operation. I think if I could, I might try and do all of my operation organically, but I don't know that that's really feasible at our scale right now. And looking at the markets we'd have to find. But we're happy doing that. I've always believed that, the classic, the consumer is always right, is something farmers need to pay attention to. There's a lot of demand for organic. There's a lot of people, maybe they don't really even buy organic in the store, but they like it. They like the fact that farmers are growing organic. And we like that public perception because that's reality. When you're a farmer, you want to have people appreciate the way you're operating your business. And that's part of our outreach also. Like you said on the website, my wife runs a trail riding business. So we have a little bit of rangeland out here. And so we allow people to bring their horses out. We don't supply horses, and go with, for a small fee, they can go trail riding. And we also give farm tours. We've had numerous UC Davis classes over the years out here touring and talking about things. So we like to be, in essence, kind of open to the public. So people can, I think farmers don't do this enough, especially larger farmers like us who are wholesalers. We don't meet the public at a farmer's market, or we don't deliver, tomatoes to their restaurant. So this is the way where consumers have a chance to interact with farmers, to come out and see what we're doing. I think that's real important because, once again, we can't stay in business very long if we're not doing our business the way the public wants it. We have to, and it's not just obeying the laws. It's just the morality of the way you operate. We've planted a lot of hedgerows. We recently planted 12,000, pollinator plants. That we had the opportunity through the pollinator partnership. I think it was funded by the Ammon board, to just increase the diversity of habitat on our non-crop areas. And so we look for opportunities like that, which we think is just part of the whole package of farming responsibly in the right way. As far as challenges, there are some pest issues that will be very problematic if they get into some of my organic tomato fields. That at this time, the solutions are chemical, and I don't obviously want to do that. So we're worried. We're trying to be very exclusive. I don't know if people know too much about the parasitic weed broom rape, but it's something that is a problem in Northern California in row crop production right now. Not a huge problem, but it could potentially be. It's a class A, noxious weed in this state. And we don't have it right now, and I'm trying to keep it out.
Uh-oh. Sounds alarming. Just to really quick, who do you partner with when trying to solve a problem like that?
Well, that problem is being worked on by the entire industry, the tomato industry. And so we have a California Tomato Research Institute, which we all growers contribute money to, a few pennies per ton of tomatoes you sell. We obviously have UC right next door. We have pathologists and weed scientists there doing work with us on that. And we're collaborating with people in other countries. There's other countries that have this particular problem to a much greater extent than we do. And so it's a big effort on behalf of the whole industry.
Wow, fascinating to learn more. Thank you, Bruce. Héctor, let's hear from you. What has been a major success with becoming an organic farmer? And again, what was a challenge that you had with going organic or organic production, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the successes I've sort of already mentioned at the very beginning of my introduction, but I want to reiterate that like that trust and that ability to create that certification for us opened up markets that allowed us to really insert ourselves into some of the wholesalers that we were working with. And therefore, to sort of Bruce's point as well, that he had introduced in his sort of introduction is giving that price point as well for us, right? Which is what we're really looking for as well in order for us to continue to do the good work that we're doing at our farm. And so in doing that, we were able to, you know, reach out to sellers or buyers, pardon me, buyers that were in food hubs, who were aggregators that were looking to fulfill some of the fulfillments that they were needing to do boxes for food banks. Some of the nonprofits that were really just saying like, great, we appreciate that you've taken that extra level of commitment on your behalf to become organic. And then as well as our consumers, they really appreciate that we're practicing these practices that they are familiar with, and understand what organic is now that it's been a more common sort of lexicon in people's sort of terminology. And so being able to like provide that has been really a successful component of our farm and our success. And we want to continue to keep that going for us because that has been a huge both marketing tool, but also a trust and confidence tool that we use with our consumers. As to some of the challenges, I would really say that one that Bruce had really brought up that isn't necessarily ours as well, but it has been a pest pressure from cucumber beetles on our cucumbers. And it has really decimated our ability to give a really nice, beautiful cucumber that you would normally find in your grocery stores, nicely stacked, that don't have any sort of like blemishes on your cucumber. But we also have to realize that not all produce is always beautiful. And even though it is still beautiful in its own way, we want to acknowledge that it has no difference in its taste, right? Or in the way it was grown. It just means that in mitigating these cucumber beetles has been really difficult. However, have found ways in which to overcome some of that pressure from the cucumber beetles, and it's been really just planting companion plants, such as dill, near where the cucumbers are at, just due to the sort of like aroma essence of the dill and some of the marigolds that we plant near it as well to kind of provoke less of that damage onto our produce, given that the cucumbers are constantly being pumped out on a week, 2 week to a month process, so that we can then make sure that those cucumbers go to our market as perfect as they can be and making sure that even the imperfect produce is no different from the perfect produce that we see in our grocery stores. So those are my two cents on that.
I love that. Um, well, I'm enjoying that our farmers are talking about challenges that have to do with production, right? That's the fun part of organic farming is to be out in our field and growing our products and getting to work our mad scientist brains to overcome these problems that come into our fields, just like any producer, regardless of practice, is having to do. And we have a little extra time. And so I want to also sort of flip this question to speak specifically about the organic certification process. I know, Bruce, you mentioned that you're moving certifiers right now. And Hector, I know that you certified somewhat recently. And so if you could both reflect on this question from the certification lens, what was the challenge? What felt the most challenging for you about the organic certification process, either starting that process or maybe sort of maintaining your certification? And then if you could reflect on what are the benefits of that certification process, other than sort of, the larger thing of having a certified organic product. Are there other benefits to the records or to the annual system of inspection? Are there other sort of things that you can highlight that make it sort of worth doing? Because, some of the folks that are joining us today are potentially people who are still in that decision-making space. And so just a little bit more information from you about sort of the challenges and then the benefit of the organic certification process. And Bruce, I'm going to have you go first.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Yeah, that's a good segue. Certification is a challenge, and for me, the biggest challenge is just the record keeping, the time consumption of filling out all the forms, all the parcel transfer forms, all the OSP, all that stuff. With the acreage we have, with the number of fields we have, that's a lot of paperwork that has to happen. So, like you mentioned, we all love to be out in the field. We like to grow things and everything. And that's one of my weaknesses. I'd much rather be out there doing that than be in my office filling out paperwork. But the record keeping that's required for organic certification is sometimes I consider it onerous. Sometimes I'm glad because it forces a discipline of record keeping and records that you can look back on and see how things were done. But it's a lot on a lot of different fields that has to be very meticulously recorded and organized because the inspection process, a lot of information on, operations and inputs that have to be selected, for every field have to be there at your fingertips. And so it's a lot of work. People think that, I'm going to be organically certified. I don't have to worry about pesticides and deal with that. And that's a good thing. But there's more work paper-wise in organic than there is in conventional, as far as record keeping and what you have to keep track of. So it's not an easy way out in any means. It's more work in that sense. I don't think the expense is mostly time. Yeah, there's a certification fee, but it's not a huge onerous fee in the big picture. But the time that you spend on it takes away from other things. So that's a real cost, for management, because I'm doing a lot of that myself, most of it. I mean, that's a real cost to other things I could be doing, but I'm doing organic certification. Obviously there's more to it right now because we are switching into CCOF from where we were before. But even on an annual basis, certainly I've done it for enough years. I know that there's a lot of work involved in doing that. But it's necessary. Obviously, the integrity of the organic program is absolutely essential. So I'm not complaining about doing this stuff because it's necessary. It absolutely is necessary to have these kind of records and to have it checked every year. But it is a lot of work. So I don't know if I can talk about any other benefits except that it's obviously we want to be organic on portion, so that's a good thing, and this is required. But just the discipline it enforces upon you, to operate your business in a very organized, well-recorded fashion is helpful.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I agree. I think the ability to look back and have a very clear picture of what you did, when you did it, how you did it, that is something that is such a benefit to any farmer, especially farmers who are potentially in the beginning stages of their career. And I can only imagine how challenging record keeping is on your farm. I read on your website just the sheer scale of it. I read that you have 7 miles of hedgerows, to just give an idea of what's happening out there. So thanks, Bruce. And Héctor, how about you? Specific to the certification process, what was most challenging and what is the benefit of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to sort of like Bruce's point, I think that I would similarly say that, the record keeping is the sort of like not the hardest, but it is the thing that we're also accustomed as farmers is like we all love to be outdoors doing hands-on things. And I think for a lot of us, and maybe I'm sort of like generalizing, but I think for a lot of farmers, doing any sort of record keeping, whether that be bookkeeping, doing our taxes, doing accounting, any of those sort of things, really come to become really challenging. At least for myself, that's what I can really say, and I would assume that that resonates with several other folks. And so this record keeping component can be really difficult if you're not on top of it as you're moving through the year and things are sort of happening, making sure that you're keeping on top of these sort of things. And it's not to um, dismotivate folks to become certified. The reasoning for the record keeping is so that there is a paper trail of things that are happening and making sure that there's accountability both from the farmers that are doing the work and making sure that because when you think about it, when the end of the year comes and you're needing to do an audit with your certifier, you're not going to remember what you did in January when you're in December. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping track of what's being done and being sort of like managed both from produce being grown and produce leaving your farm as well. So making sure that that is also integrated into all of it. However, it's not impossible. For all of those that are, being certified on a daily basis, and a yearly basis, we're all doing that work, in order for us to make sure we can become certified for the following year. And even though that has become the biggest sort of challenge, it's not to say that you can put systems in there and making sure that you're just sort of like checking in monthly into your books and making sure that you're fulfilling the needs that are needing for your.
Oop, Héctor froze for me.
Me too.
Okay. Well, Héctor, thank you so much for sharing that. I I can't remember what I was going to say because I'm too focused on the fact that you froze, but that's okay. Héctor will join us again, and I think we got most of his answer. We are going to move to what our final question, and then we're going to have time for question and answer from the audience. The last reflection I would love to hear from you both is sort of advice. What advice would you give to producers who are just starting the process of transitioning production to organic? So we can let's get out in our field. We can give advice about sort of if you're just starting changing ground that's been managed conventionally to managing it organically, what's some advice that you would give? And also getting started with that certification process. Are there any sort of wise words that you would give to anyone who's joined us today who is, just starting that process? And Bruce, we'll hear from you first.
Well, I covered a little bit of that in the sense that the record keeping is absolutely essential, of course. And so we all love to be out in the field farming. That's what motivates us. There's a lot of young people now that really would love to be organic farmers, and that's fantastic. We need more farmers of all sizes, and so we need these people. So I don't want to discourage anybody, but remember, to be successful, the money counts. And so you kind of have to be a little bit ruthless in your mind as far as this is, yeah, I want to do this. Idealistically, this is what I want to do, but let's remember the bottom line. Look at your bank account, look at everything, keep track of everything, and be a little bit ruthless on your economic decisions and be realistic with yourself on what really works. A lot of people want to be farms at a certain scale, and sometimes that doesn't work depending on the markets you have and the crops you grow. You may want to do it really bad, but be realistic with yourself about what it really is going to work economically, because you're not sustainable if you're not in business in a couple of years. So, we want everybody to succeed. We need, every farmer of all sizes in this country and around the world now. And we need a lot of young blood in this business. I'm one of the old guys, and I can see, back very easily about what I went through, but we need the young people coming in to do things different than I'm doing now. Don't ever think you're looking over the fence at your neighbor and they've got it all figured out, because 2 years from now, they'll be doing something different. So be very flexible in the way you operate. If I farmed the way my dad did, I'd be broke right now, because you have to adapt constantly to markets, to crops, to regulations, whatever it is. But I just want to give everybody kind of a reality check. It's a very competitive field out there, and go for it. But it's a challenge, and being organic is an advantage that allows success on somewhat of a smaller scale, possibly, than being conventional. And so that's critical. And the direct marketing aspect of the organic business is absolutely necessary for the vast majority of organic farmers. But the marketing is just as important as the growing. Doesn't do any good to grow a whole bunch of stuff if you don't sell it. So, be realistic with yourself. Look at the whole program. Look at your finances constantly. Spend a lot of time marketing, having the marketing plan before you ever plant that crop, and keep very, very good records.
Wise words, Bruce. Thank you
Well, I
so
hope it's
much.
not too discouraging to people. I don't want it
No,
to be. I want everybody to be successful.
no, I think it's an important reality check that take your business seriously is what you're saying, and that is an important thing. And yeah, really appreciate those. And Hector, how about you? What advice would you give to folks that are just getting started, transitioning ground to organic and starting the certification process potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the advice that I would give to any sort of farmer is, look at what sort of resources you have available at your regional sort of area. That could be from your county to like a state or even an agency or a federal agency. So really looking closely first at where you are and then kind of coming out from there on out. So really looking at, for like example, your University of California Cooperative Extension as a means to sort of help you guide in transitioning or looking for resources if you are already in that transition to see what sort of things you might need. There are several organizations out there that are very farmer led, and one of those being CAFF, which stands for Community Alliance for Family Farmers. They have a great resources on their page for organic certification. And so really kind of like delving deep into those resources to kind of familiarize yourself with what you're looking for and how you're hoping to transition. Or, those could be sort of starts. I'd also really suggest, looking at the National Center for Appropriate Technology, which is also known as NCAT. They have amazing resources on their website as well, touching on organic and other ways of which to mitigate pests and just practices that you can sort of take on at your farm. And then of course, your certifier. In this case, for us, CCOF is our certifier, and we really saw that the CCOF Foundation grant for organic transition was a really helpful component for us to like move forward in that process. Because we didn't, as a beginner farmer and as a small operation, not always do we have the capital for us to like initiate all of these practices all at once. And so, trying to find grants that will support you and assist you in that process through economic means is a way for you to get through that, process of becoming organic transition. And then, of course, on a federal level, there's that, transitioning to organic partnership program, which is called TOP, and really sort of, initially sort of seeing what there is for you to offer as well for assistance economically, mentorship, or even assistance on your sort of transitioning as you go into that. So those would be the sort of the slew of things that I would offer from, your most regional to your state to your certifier and to a federal level, right? And so those are sort of the things that I would give as advice.
Wonderful. Your two answers just really wrapped it up, I think. Take your business seriously, and also there's so much support out there for producers, especially right now. And so, of course, everyone, you're here with us today, and so that's a great step. And we just, encourage you to keep reaching out for support. Before we move into Q&A from the audience, I remembered what I was going to say earlier, and I want to add my 2 cents to this question too, as a former organic producer. Your OSP and your record keeping systems, when you start looking at what is out there, it feels like you have to change yourself a lot to fit into that system. And I really want to encourage people to look at it that an OSP, your organic system plan, and all of the records and your application for organic, like really you can cater those, you can personalize those so that they fit with the way that you are doing things. Of course, you have to fit your business to meet organic regulation, but the way that you keep records and the way that you track things in your farm and when you fill out paperwork and how you do it, all of that is up to you to decide, and play to your own strengths, right? Don't try and fit into a system that's not going to work with the way that you do things. And so if it's a waterproof notebook on the dashboard of the truck, or if it's a spreadsheet on the computer, or if it's an app, there's lots of different options and none of them are correct. You just have to choose the one that you're going to do. The right answer is keeping the record, not how you keep it. So that was the thing that I want to add in, that, just like your farm, you have to be specific about your land and what the sort of very unique opportunities presented to your microclimate and your specific parcel and your specific community and markets. You're sort of fitting your business into those unique opportunities. The same can be said for the way that you choose to certify organic and go organic. It's going to fit into your sort of unique way of doing things. Well, Bruce and Héctor, that is the end of our official questions, but we've gotten some great questions from the audience as we have been chatting away here. So I am just going to go into those. Some of them have been answered in the chat already, but I'm going to go into some other questions. This one's from Mike Nunez, and I think it's to Bruce. Bruce, why can't we grow tomatoes every year?
Well, as in all our crops, well, there's some permanent orchards, not the case, but we need to rotate the crops on the soil to basically break a disease cycle. If you grow the same crop every year, usually you end up getting a buildup of pathogens in those soils and weeds that are really competitive with that particular crop. That becomes very problematic. So going from a tomato to a wheat or a corn crop will break those cycles, because there are different diseases on those plants, different weeds can thrive in there. It's really critical to rotate your crops year to year to keep a healthy soil and a good balance.
Great. We have another question that is sort of related to this. This is from a producer who's just getting started, and they're looking to grow something during the transition period that potentially could make money. They're looking at corn, and they have a question about sort of like fertility and how would you transition the soil in that period, right? So how can you grow something that's going to benefit your organic system, but that you could potentially make money on? And I wonder if both of you, Héctor and Bruce, could speak to this, like how do you find out all of this information? Like, if you want to transition ground to organic, how do you know what type of seed you can grow, what type of fertilizer you can grow, what the right thing to do to help preparing for your future organic farm would be? So if either of you could reflect on that.
Hey, go ahead, Hector. You can start.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this particular circumstance, like normally some of the resources that I've sort of offered in the prior conversation, those would be sort of like lead ways for you to find out what is kind of needed for your operation to either begin its transition. You have to keep in mind as well, though, is that if your farm that you're currently on and stewarding hadn't been organic in the past, there is for the most part, and I would assume that most certifiers, is that there is a 3-year lapse for that site to then become organically certified. So that means that you will have to wait that transitioning time before it becomes organic. So something to also really think about. Normally with your certifier, depending who that may be, they do have resources for you to check. For example, let's just say, you know, compost locations or the compost that you're receiving, whether it meets the requirements for your organic certification, right? Or for whatever reason, you're using a specific type of neem oil, right? Making sure that it's falling within the Armory approved certification that you have. So there is like a search tool that you can use that a lot of the times you can sort of input that information in hopes of receiving whether it falls within the sort of certification, because not everything that you and I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Molly, you could maybe clarify this as well. Is even if it's Armory approved, I'm not sure if it's always falls within your certifiers. So something to really consider and think about when you're doing those sort of plannings for some of your crops that you're hoping to grow. For example, something that we have also kind of had a bit of a challenge with is that sometimes the seeds that we purchase from, for example, from many of us who do purchase from Johnny Seeds, there aren't always the organic varieties that you're wanting. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't grow a non-organic seed. It just means that you'll need to go look for several sites and vendors who may have that variety. And if you're not able to find it, I know that there is some grace on the certifier to allow you to grow out that seed, um, as long as it's being used, like the resources for that seed are all organic. So something to sort of like think around as well. And a great resource, if anything, to always ask is both the certifier that you're hoping to work with and the University of California's cooperative extension. They also have a lot of resources that may be useful as well for you.
Great. Thanks, Hector. Bruce, how about
Yeah,
you?
for transition, fertility, when we decide to transition a field, we just, in our mind, that field's now organic. And so we obviously follow all the same rules, all the same materials. Like he says, they have to be, you have to pass them through the recertification, get information on them. You better check if you're going from conventional to organic and you're already using compost, make sure that compost that's a certified source. But it's just an attitude, basically. This is an organic field now. That's what we do. And, Hector's absolutely right. We have that same problem with seed sources and organic processing tomatoes. You can't buy organic seed on any scale at all. And so we have to get letters to that effect. We check around every year and see what sources, but never been able to find any. And that's common in that particular industry. And those companies are not going to produce it organically. I don't think that's going to happen. What was the other thing I was going to say about that transition? I can't remember right now. I had another thought in my mind.
Well,
The other source of crops and things, what do you grow? He wanted to know, what can you grow and make money? Well, one of the things we do is we talk to the buyers of our organic crops and say, look, we want to transition this, but we would like some help. Can you buy some of this for us? maybe they don't give you, maybe they'll give you a little premium, maybe not, but at least get a market for this stuff and see what else is out there, because it's probably in their interest for you to have more organic ground. And so they would try and help you. So talking to them about what else is available, or in our case, where we grow some organic grains for some grain buyers, we say, what else do you have out there? What do you need? Trying to always constantly, and one of the best things, source of information for farmers is looking over the fence at your neighbors, when driving around is, it's hard to hide a farm. And so you can always see what everybody else is doing, what they're growing. And quite often we know who else is growing organic things and can see what they're growing. So you have to look at all sources. Héktor's absolutely right. There's some good, organizational sources to help that are built in, and the university is a great place to start. And CAFF has always been a great organization to help people. But you have to be creative too. Look at your customers, talk to people at the farmer's market, at the restaurant you take things to, and find out what else you might be able to grow that they can use.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I just want to highlight that talking to your buyer currently, and what you were saying is that that buyer may be interested in purchasing a crop that it cannot be named as organic because that ground is in transition, but that your buyer will know, because they know you and you have a relationship, they will know that you are transitioning that ground and growing that crop as an organic crop. And so I think that pointing to that relationship with existing customers is really critical. Let's see, what other questions are we getting here? Do either of you use a tool or an app to do record keeping? Could you talk more about your record keeping systems
I
or
don't use a
certification?
particular app. I've looked at stuff in the past. I may in the future. I just use an Excel spreadsheet. I have an iPad I carry around and try and enter everything in. A lot of times it's just wait till the end of the day and you get it in, or the next day. You hope you don't forget some things. So I'm not the best person in the world at that. There's, as far as the organization and record keeping, so I have to make an effort to do that. But I have not found an app that I thought was helpful.
Don't sell yourself short, Bruce. You
Well,
have 7 miles of hedgerows, so we know
doesn't mean there aren't good sources out there and good apps to help people be organized.
Right, right. Héktor, how about you?
Yeah, I think same to sort of what Bruce has really mentioned there. I haven't personally found a particular app that does, your traceability of like what you've been doing in order it to like file in the way that you need it for when you do your audits with your certifier. Um, I'm looking forward to that. So when there is one, please let me know, and we'd be more than welcome to give it a try. I know that there are certain things kind of like Tend. There is like an app called Tend. I know that they're trying to integrate that from what I've heard and seen, but I haven't seen it actually in like anyone particularly using it. However, maybe it's something that maybe the certifiers themselves might be willing to also like integrate as a possibility for it to like virtually live. Because currently I think for a lot of us, we have a binder, a 3-inch binder, and we put dividers, and we've got all the sheets that you can normally download from your certifier that is needed for your sort of audit and your certification. And we just kind of fill it out every month as things are sort of happening so that we don't forget what's being done at our site. But something to sort of like initiate and also share any other resources that maybe other folks have heard of, are in the works, and would love for that to be shared for all of us who are in that process right now or currently going to be in that process at some point.
Great. Thanks for sharing. I want to chime in on this one too. When we were just getting started, the records that you're tracking for organic and also to help you understand what's happening on your farm, you're tracing any product from sort of seed to sale. and what is happening to it on the farm that involves things that are coming from off of the farm. So you don't have to record when you're maybe weeding a crop or when you're watering a crop, right? Because those are just activities that have to do with things that are just within your farm. But if you're fertilizing a crop or if you're planting the seed that you've bought into soil mix that came from outside of your farm, and then you're adding a stake to trellis that plant. So those are activities where something has come from outside your farm and is contributing to the getting this crop from seed to sale. Those are the places where you do need to record what's happening because it speaks to sort of materials and things that are coming in from off the farm. And we had a different way of record keeping for sort of different places. So we had a notebook in the greenhouse, and we had our seed buying records that when we were buying our seeds, and then we'd have a notebook for greenhouse for when we would sow things. And then another big thing is that we trained our employees to keep a lot of these records. So our staff knew that part of if they were doing an activity that required record keeping, that record keeping was part of that job. It wasn't something they did later. So they would do something and it would then be recorded and then the job would be complete. And so but again, what we're all saying is that these record keeping systems are going to be specific to your farm and the strengths that you have and the system as it works on your farm. So thanks for sharing that. We've got a little time for a couple more questions here. There are a few questions about this idea of sort of growing something that's in demand, right? Doing your market research, selling something before you grow it. So could you talk about sort of what is the best way to determine what to grow? How do you figure out what's in demand? And are there any organic buyers that you would recommend people reach out to?
Yeah, we're in a different situation. We're not a direct marketing, fresh vegetable operation. So we're dealing usually with large companies that are buying our stuff at a wholesale level. Adams Grain Company in Woodland is a very large conventional and organic grain, and they have a lot of need for organic grain crops, seed crops, things like that. And so they're very, very valuable source for us. And we deal with tomato canneries, and we know which ones have organic products, and so we talk to them about, hey, can you use some tomatoes? For our business, especially in the tomatoes, we have a contract. We don't plant anything until we have a contract because it's a perishable crop at that scale. We can't afford to plant it and grow it and not have a market for it. But those are our main sources, but we're always looking at things. I'm reading things online. I'm looking at websites. I'm talking to, calling up some food companies once in a while that have organic products. Hey, is there anything I can grow out here that can supply you? Let's talk about this. Maybe there's something we can work on in the future. People need to, once again, it's a little different than in the fresh market business, but you need to grow what's already kind of being grown in your area. It's really risky to be the first person to try a new crop. Maybe it'll be lucrative, but most of the time those are not around 3 years later, because there's a reason it may not be grown there, climate wise, market wise. You need the infrastructure to process it, whatever. So, you have to do your homework in that regard. And so one of the safest things to do is look around and see what else people are being successful growing. And if you can find a market for your portion of that, then you're in the right climate, you're in the right place to grow those crops. But there is no one source. You have to keep your ear to the ground. You need to talk to other farmers. You need to pick the brain of your buyers on constantly about what else they can use. That's part of being a farmer is marketing. So you have to spend a lot of time and effort finding out what you can sell.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Héctor, would you add anything from sort of the fresh market perspective?
Not really. I mean, I think it really just sort of depends on the individual themselves and their microclimate, right? Due to what Bruce has already sort of mentioned, and I don't really want to repeat what has been already said. And I think it's really true. It really depends on where you're at in around the world, state, country. And so I think that it really just kind of depends on like your market and what are sort of where are you also wanting to sell, right? To whom and who's your audience? There are several folks who are maybe, like in our case, like we're trying to grow different varieties of um, crops that feel more in alignment with my Mexican diasporic community, right? So that could be the case for you if you identify as like Asian, you really want to grow a type of Asian um, variety that might be applicable to your community, and maybe reaching out to some of the grocery stores that source some of those produce. That could be a start. But it really is like you really got to hone down on what is the crops that you're wanting to grow. Of course, there are the run-of-the-mill crops, right? Like the kales and the chards and the Brussels sprouts and the strawberries that are all within there. And of course, there's various varieties, but you got to choose who you think might do well for what where your area is and what people are really wanting to consume. And in doing that, really taking into consideration, like if they are consuming it and they don't know what it is, I think you also have to do that educational component as well of showing folks how this particular crop is used. And that is really costly for a lot of farmers because it takes a lot of educating. It's not to say it's impossible, but it definitely is a portion that you'll need to actually include while doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think to Bruce's point, there's not really one place you can just say like these are the folks and these are what you can really look at. But there are folks that we do all know about, like Earl Organic, right? They're a really large sort of like purveyor of organic foods that, buy from organic producers. So maybe looking at some of the listings that they have, and maybe talking to their buyers as a potential. There's several folks within the San Francisco sort of like fresh produce markets. You may want to go out and introduce yourself, say, hey, listen, like I'm a farmer. I grow these particular varieties and I'd love to work with you. And this is what I'd like to do. So really kind of just the spectrum is really large. It's just a matter of like where you really want to land and how much time you also have and staff and capacity to do it as well.
Great. Thank you, Hector and Bruce. Those were really valuable answers. We could talk all day long. I could keep peppering you with questions, but we have reached the end of our time limit for today. And so I want to extend just a really gracious thank you to both of you for taking time inside on this glorious sunny day when I'm sure you have a lot of other things to be doing. This was a really wonderful conversation, and I hope that we've given the audience a lot of food for thought, and this is the start of a 10-week series for everyone. So I think we've planted lots of seeds of questions for folks. So thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Molly, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to both myself and Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Molly, Bruce, and Hector, and for that wonderful panel discussion and for taking time away from your farms to share your insights and experiences. It was so valuable. I know we did not get to every question in the chat box. We'll be following up with people as best we can to get all those questions answered. So please be patient. And also, on that note, I want to say a big thank you to all the participants here for throwing so many questions in the chat box. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about each of these farms, please visit their websites or look them up on social media. Their websites are listed in the chat box. And as has been previously noted, we'll be doing a webinar on steps to organic certification next week. So we hope you'll join us. You can also stay on for our office hours and ask some more questions to the speakers, or join the breakout room with our technical expert, Brian Coltrane from the CCOF Foundation. So one final announcement, and that is that there is another organic webinar happening on Tuesdays in the coming weeks. This webinar covers a variety of topics and research related to organic crop production. We'll share the link to the series in the chat box, and we'll also include the link to the series in the resource guide that we'll share with you after this webinar ends.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katharina. So we want to again thank all of you for joining us today. We hope today you learned something to take away with you from our wonderful panelists and moderator. We are officially going to transition over to our office hours time.